Transmitter device activated. Coordinates set for Earth 2.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Earth 2 podcast, your weekly exploration of the DC Comics multiverse and the legacy of their Golden Age characters through the Silver and the Bronze Ages of comics. I'm your dreamboat, Peter Watson.
And I'm here to carry you up the wooden hills to Bedfordshire. I'm David Steele, welcome back. Thank you for joining us. Listeners, you may have enjoyed an episode, we certainly enjoyed it.
We certainly did.
That we did earlier this year where we did issue 1 of The Sandman by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. And we basically decided as we were doing it that we were going to do the rest of the series. Isn't that right, Peter?
It most certainly is.
Yes, we had a lot of fun doing it. We were originally just going to do an episode where we covered all of issues 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, but we decided to do them all. And today we are going to do issue 2, which was published on the 30th of January 1975, almost a year or so after the publication of that first issue.
Mm-hmm.
We really enjoyed doing that. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting to see if we have as much fun doing the other issues. They're going to be coming pretty thick and fast over the next few months on the show, so that's good. But before we jump into issue 2, we should quickly sort of mention that after assigning to the rest of the series, we both did a little bit more digging on Sandman things related. And I had forgotten that Mike Allred had used the Sandman and some members of his supporting cast in his excellent series Bug back in 2017. This was a series where Mike kind of played in the same toy box that Jack Kirby had played in at DC Comics. And it's a brilliant series if you haven't read it. 6 issues, it's been collected. The bad guy in issue 2 of the Kirby Sandman, as I call it in shorthand, pops up on a variant cover.
Gasp.
It had stuff like the Losers teaming up with Sandman and Sandy and the Blue Beetle, and, you know, appearances from Atlas and the New Gods and Deadman, because of course, remember in Forever People, Forever People helped Deadman out by getting him a robot body.
Yep.
Which never appeared again until this Bug series. So yeah, there was that, and of course, around about the same time, 2017 was the Kirby Centenary, and DC published a whole bunch of one-shots. Featuring some of the characters that Jack Kirby had done. So Manhunter got one, the Boy Commandos got one, and obviously the 70s Sandman got one too. So basically what I'm saying is we're going to have a little bit more bonus material for a couple of these episodes than we originally sort of anticipated. So that's quite nice. As well as the further appearances of the Jack Kirby Sandman in 2017, there's also another Sandman which I didn't know about until really, really recently, and I was surprised that my colleague hadn't actually mentioned him earlier.
True.
To be fair. But there was another Sandman in another media, wasn't there, Peter?
There most certainly was. In the 60s Batman TV series, there was a villain in it called the Sandman, played by Michael Rennie.
Michael Rennie from off of episode 1 of The Time Tunnel.
Yes.
And from off of
The Day the Earth Stood Still. Jinx. Yes, he was in a two-parter where he actually appeared with the Catwoman as well, yeah.
I know, exciting.
And it was a two-parter called The Sandman Cometh and The Catwoman Goeth, open bracket, A Stitch in Time. That was actually out on the 28th and 29th of December 1966.
Gosh, quite early on, I suppose, then it must have been.
Yep, very much so. And of course, like many of the characters in that, he made an appearance in the Batman 66 comic.
Yes.
That was out as well.
Which is how I found out about him. And that's something I picked up at Comic Mart a few months ago, subsequent to our issue 1 episode. So probably I'll throw that onto the socials this week as well, just to pad things out. So actually quite a lot on the socials for issue 2, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. I did think it was worth mentioning all that extra context because we hadn't dug too deeply for issue 1, because at that point we thought we were just going to do issue 1, but it was like, oh, wait a minute. And then I'd read some of Bug. I'd read, obviously, the Losers and Sandman episode because, quite frankly, of course I'm going to. There was like, might as well have had a For David Steele sort of dedication at the start of it, but the whole series was amazing. It really has that 70s Kirby sort of feel to it. And Forager's a really, really interesting character. Yeah. So if you haven't read it, I would encourage you to do so. Peter, have you read it?
Yes, I read it at the time in single issues, yes.
That's all right then.
But to be honest, I don't remember much about it. I want to revisit it.
Yeah. So, well, what I'll do probably this week is I'll post a couple of the relevant covers from that series and maybe a few relevant panels and pages that feature characters that are Earth 2 podcast adjacent, and obviously the Sandman himself. So watch out for all of those over the next few days. But the main topic today, of course, is the aforementioned issue 2, January 75. Peter's going to tell us about the cover.
At the top, the line of DC superstars. He's back. The man who brought you all those wonderful stories and horrible dreams. The Sandman, Master of Nightmares. Approved by the Comics Code Authority. And the main image in the cover is very similar in some ways to the main image on issue 1's cover. You have a boy sleeping in the foreground, and he seems to be hooked up to some kind of machine. And in the background, there's an image. It's like a dream because it's all in clouds. And it's our hero, the Sandman, but he's being grasped by a big, giant, nailed, fiendish-looking creature. A horrible creature from the head. It kind of looks like a bit lizardy, almost, with big fangs. It's green with horrible eyes, and it's grasped in his taloned fingers with both his leg and his torso. The Sandman actually looks a bit petrified there.
Sandman looks, he's worried he's going to be eaten by the big green monster for his dinner.
Mm-hmm. And of course, this is a Jack Kirby cover. How can we tell? Because there's a big giant caption at the bottom that says, Jack Kirby!
Yes, which is at least the same size as the DC logo at the top and the other little circle with the price and date information. I've got the other issues to hand. So yes, Jack illustrates the cover to issue 3. Looks like it's issue 4 again. Yep, issue 5. I'm not so sure about issue 6. Oh, that's very interesting. Look at the cover of issue 6. I shall say no more because we've not read issue 2 yet, but there's a definite theme over the first few covers at least of child asleep, having bad dreams, monsters, Sandmans, etc. And we love it. Right. Thankfully, there's a large caption at the start of page 1 which sets the scene and gives us the credits for everyone responsible for this comic. The caption reads something like this.
Somewhere between heaven and earth there is a place where dreams are born and monitored. This is the domain of a legendary figure, eternal and immortal, who shares with man and beast all the secrets of the ages. He is the Sandman, and this is the Night of the Spider.
And we get the credits for this issue.
Editor Joe Orlando, script Michael Fleischer, pencils Ernie Chan, inks Mike Royer.
So the only returning creator there is inker Mike Royer. Because no Jack involvement, no Joe involvement. I think we talked about that in issue 1 when we read the text page from issue 2, but we'll probably remind and reiterate things when we get to the end of this issue and read some of the contemporary correspondence. So we have an opening splash image. The Sandman is in his dream dome. We can see Brute and Glob in their glass canisters. There's a screen behind the Sandman, which it looks like he's watching a Talking Pictures TV screening of Gorgo, to my eyes, because on the screen you can see a giant lizard-style monster devastating a city, toppling skyscrapers. In the background we can see other monsters helping. There's a big orange dinosaur-looking thing with a couple of nasty horns in its nose, and another beastie in the background, which again looks like an escapee from an old monster movie. We can see the army firing bazookas and tanks at them, and a police officer trying to keep people back, and there's close-ups of the monsters and other screens, and a ding, ding, ding sound effect is going off as the Sandman grasps his little microphone device and says, "The emergency alarm! And no wonder! Nightmare monsters have broken out of the dream stream and are overrunning the Earth!" In the background, Brute seems to hug himself and says, "So what? Everybody's entitled to a night out once in a while." And Glob says,
"Yeah, leave 'em alone. Let's just sit here and watch while they destroy the world."
Top of page 2, there is an immediate change in location and a caption reads,
It is well past midnight on a hot summer night when a weird subsea vehicle rises out of the choppy surf, lapping at the rocky shore of Dolphin Island.
Yes, we see this orange submarine submersible cutting through the waves looking very Jack Kirby indeed, with lots of dark sort of dots floating around. Very, very good work from Mike Royer here. Caption continues,
And disgorges from its innards 2 shadowy figures who pick their way warily up the steep rock-bound shore.
Yes, the 2 shadowy figures are wearing robes which cover their features, cover their bodies. We can see they're both wearing trousers and have sensible shoes on underneath. But these long brown robes have large white discs on the front that in each case has a different number. The first one, climbing up the rocky cliffs, has a large red number 2, and his colleague has a large red number 3. And I'm going to apologise in advance because that may have influenced my performance choices. Take a large swig of your drink for the next panel, listeners, for there is a full moon.
Yay!
I've not seen a full moon for a long time. We can see that the 2 men are approaching a small structure, a small cabin that exists by the seaside. We see that number 3 is holding a little tricky device in his right hand. He seems to be scanning it. As his colleague, number 2, says, "Can you manage a reading?" Number 3 says, "Yes, the boy will be perfect. Even at this range, his dreams registered to the 12th level of the angst meter." Next panel, they've crossed to the small cabin and they've managed to open up the window and they're going to climb inside. The second figure, the one nearest us, says, "The doctor will be much pleased." But he gets a shh from his friend who's raising up the window. Take another drink, listeners. We can see a full moon as we look back out through the bedroom window, and it's Jed's bedroom window, the boy who we met in issue 1. Jed is sound asleep. In the foreground of this panel as numbers 2 and 3 climb in his bedroom window. Number 2 has a weird gun device which he's pointing in Jed's direction. Jed suddenly startles, awake, in the final panel of page 2, looks up at these two figures and says,
Huh? Hey, who?
In the first panel of page 3, we hear his cries for help through his bedroom door.
Help! Help!
And his grandpa Ezra, he's woken by the screams and he thinks, what? That's Jed. Call him for help. Crosses to open Jed's bedroom door. The next panel saying, Jed boy, what? Hey! As he sees Jed being manhandled by numbers 2 and 3 and take a drink as the full moon looming through the window behind him. Grandpa Ezra continues, Hey, you let go of him! Jed mumbles as number 3 puts his hand over his mouth. Grandpa Ezra continues saying, Let go of that boy or I'll... But he stops with a ah! As number 2 shoots him with his weird sci-fi ray gun which makes an amazing sound effect. And in panel 4 we see Grandpa Ezra out for the count down on the ground. There's a slow dissolve.
Soon?
We're inside the weird orange submersible. Number 3 is looking through a periscope as he pilots it, and we see that Jed has been tied to a metal post, the hooded figure of number 2 standing in front of him. Jed says,
My grandpa! What did you do with my grandpa?
The old man will probably survive. I gave him only a second-degree stun.
Who are you? What do you...
Jed is cut off because number 2 has slapped him with a whap as he says, You'll see soon enough, now shut up.
For hours the bizarre craft knifes its way through the silent undercurrents, and finally...
Has to be said, Ernie and Mike are doing a brilliant job here. This looks very Kirby indeed. It's gorgeous. Can't emphasise enough. This is beautiful. If you don't have these comics, listeners, track them down, own them, read them, digest them, savour them. They are just magnificent. From inside the orange submersible, we hear the voice of one of Jed's kidnappers saying, They've sighted us on the Omni screen. The camouflage doors are opening. To which Jed says,
Where are we? Where are you taking me?
But Jed's captors do not answer his question. In total silence, they berth the sea vessel in a secret inlet in the bowels of the cliff, and lead Jed through a series of labyrinthine passageways, culminating in a weird subterranean chamber illuminated by the glare of blinding fluorescent lights.
This panel will make it onto the socials because we are inside the baddie's lair. There's a high ceiling, lots of bright orange and pink and blue circles sort of detailing it. These must be the aforementioned binding fluorescent lights. There is lots of equipment in a Jack Kirby style. There are more hooded figures we can see in the background that up on a sort of higher level that you can get up to by going up some stairs. There are some more figures with numbers in their shrouds. We can see number 4, number 7 and number 8. So hopefully they'll all get some lines in the story as well. Dominating proceedings in front of a large screen, which is a green frame but nothing showing on it, so it's white at the moment, is the guy who's in charge of this horrible underground situation. Numbers 2 and 3 have walked in poor Jed, who's still in his bare feet, the poor soul, and they're greeted by a horrible sight. In front of them is what looks like the remnants of a man. What's left of his torso is obviously overweight. He has grotesque, overbiting teeth, if that makes sense. He wears red sort of goggles around his eyes, really heavy jowly face. Sprouting out the top of his head is like a crow's nest of orange hair. And he seems to be in some kind of little mobile wheeled transport device. It's blue with a sort of yellow band around the middle. There's a large pink disc in the foreground of this transport, which is surrounded by a gold band. We can see the casters, very obviously the caster wheels that it rolls about on, but most strikingly, he doesn't have normal human arms. He has 8 metallic tentacles, which range and float about all around him. He's like the most grotesque, alternate, sick version of Dr. Octopus you could probably imagine. Like a cross between Dr. Octopus and Davros, designed by W. Heath Robinson.
With a touch of mojo thrown in as well.
Yeah. The guy from that Excalibur story I read that one time. Number 3 says to this grotesque figure, "We have brought the boy, Dr. Spider. His reading is even higher than we anticipated." Number 2 is holding up the little gadget they had earlier on, and he says, "Yes, the angst meter places him at the 12th level." Dr. Spider takes all this in and says,
That's probably because he was orphaned at an early age. Quickly now, install him in the dream room.
The caption for the first panel, page 5.
Jed struggles mightily, but to no avail, and Moments later...
Yes, we see that numbers 2 and 3 have strapped Jed to a table and they've attached to his head a metal band with cords and wires coming out of it that connects into the equipment that's at the end of the bed. We can see all sorts of other equipment poking into the corners of the room. As number 2 fastens the straps around Jed's left ankle, number 3 says, "Have you administered the drug?" "Yes. Within moments he'll be fully asleep."
And then...
Numbers 2 and 3 report back to Dr. Spider, number 2 saying, "The boy has been installed in the dream room, Dr. Spider."
Excellent. Now let's see how he reads out on the Somnambo screen.
And with that, one of his left tentacle arms operates a switch on the base of his chair. There's a audible click. This is just like Davros. Davros had not been on television yet, though. We're still about a month or two away from Genesis Part 1 even being on screen. What an interesting combination. Anyway, he clicks a switch and the big screen behind him, which previously had been blank, roars into life. "Dr. Spider, those monsters, what are they?"
Those, number 2, are little Jed's nightmares, electronically transmitted from the inner recesses of his mind to the surface of my Somnambo screen. Look how vivid his nightmares are. Look how frightened he is.
And we see Jed seemingly jumping around in some kind of rocky, almost lunar surface, with some horrible beasties looming over him. There's a little black will-o'-the-wisp type character with like horrible spidery legs and a weird red mouth, and there's a orange lizardy dragon type thing with another scary wide open mouth, and there's a big massive long green snake with wide red eyes, which I'm miming for the benefit of YouTube viewers, and guess what, of course its mouth is wide open as well. Poor Jed, he must be having a horrible sleep. I felt like I did last night actually, listeners, but such is life. Top of page 6, you see Dr. Spider with all this stuff playing out on the screen behind him as number 2 says, "You mean we snatched a kid just so you could watch his dreams, like on television?"
No, my inquisitive friend, not exactly. My Somnambo apparatus has a distinctly practical application, as you'll soon see. Stand right over there.
And again he gestures with his tentacles, and number 2 moves forward to stand in the centre of the large chamber. We get an overhead shot here which shows sort of weird green tile pattern on the floor, but at the centre of all this is another disc which is covered in smaller pink circles. That's the only way I can put it. Number 2 stands dead in the centre of it saying, "Here."
Yes, that's right.
And we hear another click as Dr. Spider activates another bit of machinery, and suddenly from up out of the floor, around the circle where number 2 is standing, emerges 4 pieces of glass which all join together to encase and contain number 2 within a clear glass dome. Number 2 exclaims as all this is happening, "Huh? Hey, what's happening? What are you doing, Doc?" And we see his hood fall back to really his red hair and heavy, almost caricatured features. Again, Ernie and Mike doing their best to be as Kirby as possible. The dome clicks into place around him as Dr. Spider says,
"My, but you ask a lot of questions, number 2. It's not wise to be so impatient."
Number 2 starts banging on the inside of this dome that he's now trapped in, saying, "Hey, Doc, let me out of here! Let me out!"
As you have already seen, I have found a way to tap the dream centers of the brain so that the images that appear there may be focused on a special screen of my own design.
And with that, again, one of Dr. Spider's electronic tentacles clicks another switch on his chair. Number 2 notices that a doorway is appearing in the transparent dome in front of him. "Hey, that door, it's opening!" Dr. Spider, meanwhile, continues his description of the abilities of his screen as he says,
"But what you haven't seen is the way I can animate the nightmare images and make them do my bidding."
And we see that the second part of his speech is coming through a little speaker inside the dome where number 2 is trapped. Number 2 suddenly recoils within the dome because clambering in through the open doorway is a horrible, large, scary green... It's very like the one that Peter described on the cover, to be honest. I think it's the same creature, with its long talons and its wide mouth and its long tongue and its vicious red eyes, climbing into the dome towards number 2, who yells, "Oh my God, what is it?"
Oh, come now, number 2. You know what it is. It's a monster from Little Jed's nightmare. Isn't he a cutie?
And we see that the monster has grabbed number 2 in its talons and starts dragging him towards it. Number 2 screams,
The piteous shrieking ends in a muffled gurgle.
Yeah, because the monster swallows, eats number 2. Oh my goodness.
Now, number 3. Are there any questions about my scientific work that I might answer for you?
Number 3, visibly shaking, replies, "No, Dr. Spider. My only wish is to serve you in complete obedience, Doctor."
Meanwhile, in the Sandman's dream dome...
Yeah, we can see the Sandman is watching one of the many screens, and he's stroking his chin and saying out loud, I can't understand it. Kids all over the world are sleeping at this hour, yet the nightmare level is down drastically. Brute and Glob in the background, watching as usual, as Brute says, So what, Sandman? Can't you stand a little peace and quiet for once?
Brute's right. What's so bad about a night without nightmares?
Quiet, you nightmares! You both know what will happen if people are prevented from coping with their nightmare demons while they're asleep. Well, if it's a scary nightmare you want, let me out of here. Blow your hypersonic whistle and let me out. When I'm ready to let you out, you'll be the first to know it, Brute.
Maybe you better check what's happening in the dream stream, Sandman.
That's just where I'm headed, Glob. And we see that Sandman is pulling on the handle which opens up the ejector tube which will take him down to the dream stream. We can also see there's another hole that would lead him to the reality stream, of course. The caption of the first panel on page 9.
The Sandman catapults himself into the dream stream, the eerie twilight dimension, which is the dwelling place of all the hideous nightmare phantasms.
Yes, and we see the Sandman flying through a weird psychedelic landscape of pulsating orange energy and pink shapes and yellow stars and weird green and pink and blue foliage, for want of a better way of putting it. If there's room, we'll put it in the socials. As he hurtles through this weird landscape, he's thinking, I'll head for the Fantasy Forest, home of the Nightmare Wizard. If anyone has the information I'm looking for, it'll be him.
And in the twinkling of an eye...
The forest. Now I'll have to go the rest of the way on foot. And we see Sandman with his cape blowing behind him, walking through this weird, nightmarish landscape. And what he doesn't see, but we see, is a plant in the foreground, which has long tendrils rising up and reach towards him, and then wrap the tendrils around him. As he's making his way, Sandman's thoughts are interrupted. And hoping I don't... Ah!
The tentacled leaves of the fantasy plant enfold the Sandman in a deadly embrace.
Yes, and we can see it's like a weird sort of orange Venus flytrap situation is opening up beside him. Sandman has reached into his belt to try and help himself, but he hasn't done very well, as he thinks, my scent cartridges, useless here.
But with a final desperate effort of will, the universal master of dreams breaks free.
Yeah, there's a massive snap sound effect as he manages to release himself from the tendrils, thinking, phew. For a moment there, I thought I was a goner.
And without further incident, carefully makes his way to the forbidding mountain retreat of the Nightmare Wizard.
Yes, we see the Sandman, and you can probably take a drink, because there's a couple of weird, scary, other dimensional moons floating in the air behind him. Our listeners will be paralytic by the end of this episode. We see the Sandman approaching a cave, and from inside, we hear a voice.
Who's that? Who's that lurking outside my cave? Ha! So it's you, Sandman. I wonder when you'd be coming.
Sandman is wide-eyed as he takes this all in. In the next panel, we get a wider look at the room. There's a large cauldron bubbling away on the floor between them as Sandman says, I won't mince words, wizard. What's happened to the nightmare level? Why isn't anyone having a nightmare tonight?
Wouldn't you like to know?
You'd better tell me, or I'll... With that, Sandman grabs the wizard by the scruff of his rotting robes as the wizard replies,
You'd better quit while you're ahead, Sandman. The dream stream is my domain, not yours, you know.
Tell me what I want to know, wizard, or I'll be forced to take drastic action.
All right, Sandman. You're too late to do anything about it anyway. The reason that your precious little children aren't having their precious little nightmares, Sandman, is that a certain Dr. Spider has been removing nightmare demons from the dream stream, so that he can use them to conquer the world.
What? And you've been letting him?
Why not? Don't you think Dr. Spider could rule the world as well as all the present administrations?
That's not the point, and you know it. I'm leaving, and tell those fiendish plants of yours to leave me alone on the way out.
Of course, Sandman, of course. But believe me, you're too late to stop Spider now.
And then, in less time than it takes to tell...
Yeah, we see Sandman emerging from one of the tubes as he arrives back at the Dream Dome. Brute says, How did it go, Sandman?
You going to let us out now?
Says Glob. No, I'm keeping you two in reserve.
Where are you going now? You just got back.
And we see that Sandman is launching himself into the tube that leads to the reality stream, saying, Into the reality ejector. Dr. Spider is stealing nightmare monsters from the dream stream and unleashing them on the mortal world.
Instantaneously, the Sandman is transmitted into the world of reality.
Yes, we see him dropping into view in front of a large city. There's a couple of tall, visible skyscrapers, one of which to my eyes looks a little bit like the Chrysler Building, so he might be in New York, who can say. As he materialises, Sandman is thinking, Great Scott! Was the wizard right? Am I already too late?
The Sandman finds the city besieged by monsters from the Dream Stream.
Yeah, it's almost like we're at the image from the opening splash panel. We can see the army firing tanks, bazookas, etc., the police trying to keep civilians at bay. There's one soldier yelling an instruction which goes,
Ready bazookas! Fire!
and as the bazooka fires into the distance, we see some large nightmarish monsters knocking over buildings. There's one large purple sort of lizard, and there's the weird sort of black Will-o'-the-Wisp type guy who we saw on the screen earlier on. One soldier, after firing a bazooka, observes, "It don't do no good, Sarge. They just keep on coming." And forcing his way through the crowd of civilians, approaching all the armed people, is the Sandman. And he's in the process of saying, "Everyone get back, please. Let me handle this." A policeman tries to stop him, saying,
Get back behind those barricades, you lunatic!
"Officer, please. I'm the only one who can stop those creatures."
You weirdos give me a laugh. Those monsters have already wiped out 2 entire infantry units, and you think...
No time to argue with him, thinks the Sandman. Every second counts.
With deft fingers, the Sandman snaps away one of the sand cartridges affixed to his belt, and...
The policeman is in the process of saying,
You can whip 'em all by your...
and as the Sandman gestures, throwing the sand in the face of the two cops, the policeman's colleague starts falling backwards, saying, "Hey, that's sand. Putting me to sleep." Sandman puts another bit of his equipment to his lips, thinking, "My hypnosonic whistle isn't made to operate under these conditions. I only hope it works." We're now suddenly in the point of view of 2 soldiers standing nearby as the Sandman blows into his hypnosonic whistle. The first soldier says,
Hey, what's a hippie doing whistling for his dog at a time like this?
"I don't know, but look, the monsters, they're starting to vanish." And indeed, in the background, as the Sandman blows his whistle, we see a little burst of jaggedy yellow energy come from it, fly up towards the monsters that are looming over the city, and they start to dissolve and fade out. A policeman yells in the next panel,
They're gone! It's almost as if the whole thing was just a bad dream.
Standing next to him at this point, holding a hose quite close by, is a fireman, and he suddenly says, "Hey fella, are you the Sandman?" "Yes, but how did you know that?" "Oh, just a lucky guess," says this fireman, who's suddenly produced a little blue gun, which looks very like the one that took out Grandpa Ezra at the start of the story, and with a... he fires it at the Sandman, who collapses. You can see that the fireman's hat had a number 3 on it, which falls off as he hoists the Sandman over his shoulder and runs off, leaving soldiers and members of the public to look astonished.
Soon...
And we see that Sandman has been restrained, tied down in the same sort of bed that Jet had been tied down on, restrained by straps and a little metal band attached to his head with wires coming out of it that are attached to the equipment behind him. Dr. Spider is positioned between Sandman and Jed, who can still see in his bed. A couple of other hooded figures standing there. Number 4 has joined the proceedings. We'll see if he gets any lines. Dr. Spider is saying,
This is indeed a triumph. What matter if tonight's little effort ended in failure? With the dream power of the Sandman at my disposal, I will be invincible. The entire world will be my plaything.
But meanwhile, in the Sandman's Dream Dome...
Yes, we see Brute and Glob still in their glass prisons, watching events involving the Sandman on a large screen. Glob is saying,
Brute, look, the Sandman's in trouble.
"So what? That's his problem."
Brute, be serious. We've got to help him, but we're trapped inside these tubes until Sandman blows his hypnosonic whistle to let us out.
Says you.
What do you mean?
I mean, sometimes I like to get out of here, even when that spoilsport Sandman doesn't want me to, so I made myself a spare whistle. He doesn't even know I have it.
Wow! What are we waiting for? Blowing it quick!
And Brute does so, and again we see the familiar little burst of gold energy emerging from the whistle.
The tubes holding Brute and Glob are instantly opened by the whistle's hypnosonic vibrations.
And it's obvious that the Dream Team have hurtled themselves down one of the tubes because they're now running along a rippling burst of golden energy, with Glob saying,
What are we going to do once we get to Dr. Spider's headquarters, Brutes?
"How do I know? Don't worry, we'll think of something original."
And within milliseconds...
Yes, they have made it there, and they're looking through a grate in the wall down at Sandman in the sick bay, or whatever it is, the infirmary, whatever it's called, with Glob saying,
Quick, Brute, let's wake him up and get him off that...
"Oh no, you don't. If we just charge in there, he'll know I've got a spare whistle. I've got a better idea. Come on." And we see in the next panel that the Dream Team have suddenly appeared in a cloud above the Sandman's head. Brute says, "See? As long as we stay inside the fantasy dimension, he'll think he's just having a dream about us."
Neat idea, Brutes. Are you untying his straps?
We see that Brute is reaching out this little cloud towards Sandman on the table, and he replies, "No, I'm just loosening them." That way he'll think they came loose themselves by accident. OK, now I'm going to wake him up. Get set to scram.
Right.
And with that, Brute blows on his own hypnosonic whistle again. We see a little burst of jagged energy, and Sandman sits bolt upright, the straps breaking in front of him, the headband falling away from his cranium as he says, "Huh? Where am I?" He looks down at the straps, thinking, "I've been asleep, unconscious. Dr. Spider must have used some sort of drug on me." He gets up, standing to his feet, and looks around and notices he's not the only one there. "Hey, that's my pal Jed. I'll bet Spider's been sapping his nightmare power. I'll let him sleep. He'll be safe here for now."
Stealthily, the fearless Dream Master makes his way down the white-tiled corridors until...
Yep, he emerges into the control chamber of Dr. Spider's headquarters. We see number 6 standing in the corner. Up on the balcony we can see number 7, and at the top of the flight of stairs we also see number 8. Let's hope they all get some lines. As he rushes in, Sandman says, "The game's up, Spider. You might as well surrender."
You! How did you get free? Well, no matter. You won't be free for long.
The hooded numbered figures all start to circle and surround Sandman as Dr. Spider says,
Take him alive, if you can. I want him back in the dream room.
Sandman isn't intimidated by the hooded figures as he replies, "Sorry, boys. I've already seen the dream room." Takes out the hypno whistle again, puts it to his lips, thinking, "Too bad Brute and Glob aren't here. It'd give these goons some nightmares to remember." With that, he blows the whistle, and again the jagged energy plays out towards the hooded numbered figures, who all start tipping over. The first one says, "Hey, that noise! It's making me sleepy." "Me too," exclaims the visible number 5. In the background, an angry-looking Dr. Spider yells,
You fools! You let him use his hypnosonic whistle on you. That little toy of yours won't work on me, Sandman. Even your whistle can't reach my cerebrosonic wavelength. Besides, now it's my turn to do something tricky.
And with that, and another click as one of his tentacled arms activates something in his chair, something weird starts happening as Dr. Spider continues,
You were a fool to leave little Jed asleep in the dream room, Sandman.
It now looks like the Sandman's been transplanted back inside the big viewing screen. He's standing in a white void as the big green snake monster and the purple lizardy monster and a couple of others suddenly form around him. Looking up at the screen, Dr. Spider says,
Those are his nightmare monsters I've unleashed against you. And you know what will happen if you destroy the monsters, don't you, Sandman?
"Little Jed will die."
You are brilliant, Sandman. So long, sucker.
As the nightmare monsters close in, the Sandman is faced with an agonizing dilemma.
He yells as the big purple weird scary lizard monster circles him in a tendril. The Sandman thinks, "Can't let them get me. But if I shatter them with a hypnosonic whistle blast, the ectoplasmic shock will kill Jed."
Meanwhile, asleep in the dream room, Jed witnesses the Sandman's death struggle in the form of a violent dream, unaware that his own life hangs in the balance.
Yes, we see Jed dreaming the Sandman's struggle with the big purple creature as a big black will-o'-the-wisp guy with open mouth hovers beside him.
The odds are overwhelming, but the Sandman battles on.
Yeah, we see Sandman reaching for his belt in the next panel as he thinks, "Got to reach my sand cartridges." And he's successful. In the final panel of page 18, he managed to open a sand cartridge and fling it in the direction of the big purple monster, saying, "Here's mud in your eye, you uglies." We pass a full-page advertisement for Tor by Joe Kubert, which is interesting. And in the first panel of page 19, we see the Sandman standing successful with all the monsters down on the ground beside him as he thinks, "Good, they're all unconscious. Now, if I can turn my whistle to its highest possible pitch, I can send them all back to the dream stream where they belong, without hurting them or Jed."
As the Sandman blows on his whistle, the monsters dematerialize into nothingness. And then...
We see the Sandman approaching the equipment in front of the big screen of Dr. Spider's, and he's thinking, "This infernal machinery is a menace to all humanity. It must be destroyed." With a large hammer, which he's materialised out of nowhere it seems, and a large smash sound effect, he gets stuck in. Starts hammering at the equipment.
As the fiendish apparatus collapses under the Sandman's mighty blows, little Jed awakens.
Yes, Jed sits up, wide-eyed, as the headband falls away from him, and he says,
Where am I? Why aren't I home in my own bed?
Sandman arrives to release him from the straps, saying, "You soon will be, Jed, and by the time you awaken, this night's evil will have faded from your memory like any other dream."
It will?
A short blast of the Sandman's whistle sends Jed whirling homeward, flashing through the nighttime sky in a burst of brilliant starlight.
Which we don't see, sadly. It's a "say what you don't see" caption. What we do see, though, is Sandman running off thinking, "Now for Dr. Spider. He must not escape." We see that he's obviously running through the lower levels of this weird island where everything is set up. We can see an opening far away in the cave wall, Dr. Spider's vehicle making its way through the water towards it. Sandman enters the room saying, "Oh no, I'm too late. He's escaping in that weird submarine. And at this range, there's no way I can stop him." And then we see a little speaker on the wall, and a familiar voice emerges from it.
That's right, Sandman.
What?
I am indeed escaping. You have won the first round, Sandman, but have no fear. We shall meet again, and... Wait, the sub's electrical inputs are oscillating at too high a level. The sub's going to...
In a shower of sparks, the submarine explodes.
Yes, there's a massive baroom. And that appears to be it for Dr. Spider. Good grief, there's a slow dissolve.
Is Dr. Spider really dead? Only time will tell. Later, back at the Dream Dome.
Yep. See Sandman sat in his big comfy chair looking thoughtful, Brute and Glob back in their glass canisters as Sandman says, "I sure could have used your help in tonight's adventure, you two."
Oh, really?
"Yes, but in all the excitement, I forgot to whistle for you."
Ah, that's okay, Sandman. Our feelings aren't hurt, are they, Brute?
"No, why should they be?" And a small caption reads,
The end.
Next issue on sale during the last week in March.
Well, that was great fun, wasn't it?
Oh, amazing.
I think
Amazing.
genuinely as much fun as issue 1.
Yeah, it's certainly up there. It doesn't really build on anything that issue 1 had, but issue 1 was so rich with ideas that you don't need to. It's a continuation. It's fantastic. Dr. Spider.
Dr. Spider, Nightmare Fuel. I mean, it's a lot more linear than issue 1.
Yeah.
Because all the stuff with that little green doll type thing, a lot of that felt like very out of sequence and very abrupt and not like it was going anywhere. It all connected up, and then eventually it did when General Electric and his international cadre of bad guys were all involved with it. This was a lot more straightforward. It's obvious that everyone involved was doing their best to try and sort of evoke what had been done with issue 1.
Indeed, yeah. I do think that keeping Mike Royer on as inker is definitely the best way to keep continuity in this, because it does evoke that Kirby style. It's great.
Yeah.
I mean, the look of Dr. Spider, though, is fantastic. I mean, it's not just the hair and the goggles and the teeth and the overbite. It's the fact it's just so repulsively rotund.
Yes.
And the pincers at the end of all the tendrils as well.
Yes.
They're just horrible.
Yeah.
You can just imagine them all moving constantly and just like being you've no idea what's coming. It's great. Because of course Dr. Octopus only has got 4 tentacled arms.
Of course, he doesn't actually have 8. Of course, that's right.
So this is a bit of an upgrade, and as you said, this is before Davros first appears.
I know.
And he is very Davros-like in both his methodology to a certain extent and his appearance, you know?
Yeah, looking at the big splash image where he's revealed in page 4, I mean, everything else looks a bit more Kirby-like than Dr. Spider, to be honest.
Yes.
But everything you've just said is completely accurate. He works really well. He is horrible. I mean, these hooded guys, they remind me very much of the faceless sort of masked guys from OMAC, you know, the sort of world sort of intelligence type thing.
Sure, yeah.
But there's also an obvious sort of, I think, prisoner influence here as well.
Yes, I can see that.
You know, the fact that they're all numbered, you know, their faces are hidden, they all have, you know, just numbers instead. And obviously there can't be too much of a hierarchy if he's quite happy just to get rid of his number 2, you know, a moment's notice by, you know, sacrificing him to a big dream monster that eats him.
Is it a rank or is it just a designation?
I don't know.
The numbers?
I don't think it's a rank. I think it's probably just a...
Yeah.
Well, you know, now that he's been eaten, will there be a new number 2? See what I did there? No, it's difficult to know where to start. I just want to praise it. I liked it a lot. Like you can, as we said, there's obvious attempts to emulate what was done with issue 1. It doesn't feel like a rush job. It doesn't feel like a hack job. It feels like they've sat down and gone, right, what can we distill from what Joe and Jack did? How can we replicate that, but still make it seem original, not seem like it's... It does feel like it's still in the same ballpark or universe. I mean, there's even another scene randomly involving some members of the services and the emergency services and Sandman getting to interact with them briefly.
And that scene's brilliant because, as you said, it reflects what was in issue 1, but also it's a case of mad stuff is happening and then this guy in the weird red and yellow costume appears and they're like, go away, you weirdo, we're trying to deal with this.
Yes.
Which literally is, it feels right. It just all kind of like clicks. It's not like Superman flying in and saying, I'm here to help. It's like, who's this guy that's coming in his pajamas? Yes. It's so bizarre. I've actually pajamas is quite appropriate.
Yes, of course. Your favourite worst nightmare and nightwear and all that.
But it's so enjoyable. And I suppose it did actually add a bit of layer onto the first one with bringing in the Nightmare Wizards.
Yes.
Adding a bit more to the mythos, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah.
As we said when we did issue 1, like some elements of this were sort of revisited in the 80s, 90s DC Sandman series, and it'd be interesting to go back and look at those issues again and see if there's anything more that I don't think they took over anything about the Nightmare Wizard or anything like that, did they? I mean, I know, as I said, that General Electric and Dr. Spider both pop up in the relevant issues of Bug. I'm going to have to flick through that again and see if there's any sign of the Nightmare Wizard. I don't think so. But yeah, the Nightmare Wizard's fascinating because obviously him and the Sandman know each other.
Yeah.
You get the sense there's a bit of history.
Yeah.
And Sandman's like, right, something's going on with the nightmares. I'm going to go and see this guy and see if he's got anything to do with it.
And he's actually kind of like interrogating him. He's like,
Yeah.
you better tell me, or,
Yeah.
you know, it's really threatening him. Which is...
And because that's quite, it gives it sort of almost procedural
Yeah.
sort of feeling. It's like Sandman's trying to figure out what's going on.
What's the word in the street, Johnny?
Yeah, exactly. And again, those pages, it doesn't look as if Ernie has sat down and, you know, traced over anything Kirby has done, but the POV shifts, and as you say, Roy probably had a lot to do with it, but they do feel very reminiscent and very, I suppose the word, I don't think we've said it yet, is consistent.
Yes.
It does feel very consistent with what we've done. I mean, the characterisation of Brute and Glob, because, you know, they were kind of a bit sneaky in the first issue, and now they're, you know, it's interesting they actually go and help him.
Yeah.
Rather than try and edge him out the way and take over.
Yeah, Brute and Glob are fascinating because it's almost like a sadomasochistic thing they've got going on, because it's like they want to be out of their capsules and out to do things, but when they get out, they're helping and doing things, but when they're inside the capsules, they're saying, let them die, what are you doing? You know, that sort of thing. It's so bizarre, but when they're out to do good stuff.
Yes.
And the fact that Brute has now got his own whistle is fascinating and can control coming in and out.
Yeah.
But he wants to keep it secret because he doesn't want it to be confiscated, because that's his freedom, if he so desires it. And Glob obviously is like, yes, let me out as well, please.
Yeah, I mean, I want to know, like, how did Brute go about making the whistle? Did maybe he just dreamt about one himself and was able to make it come to life? I mean, that's the sort of thing you'd expect.
Maybe one of the times when he was out, he could do that.
Yeah.
And then, you know, he used some dream energy to create it and then took it back in with him. That makes sense, because obviously I think the capsules are supposed to negate what they can do.
Yeah.
But again, it's just, there's no huge explanation of them and why they're contained like that and why they help him if they are his prisoners. It's such a weird dynamic, but it's fascinating and it's interesting and it's great. Also, I love when they go to rescue him. It's classic Shaft syndrome. They're like in an air duct looking through a grill, spying on him and on the bed.
Yes.
Which I love. I love that trope, the whole ear duct thing.
And even he's not really aware of how he gets free at that point.
Yeah, he just thinks he's loosened a bit.
Yeah.
One thing I will say about the artwork, though, is although I think Ernie Chan and Mike Royer do a great job, the layouts are lacking the Kirby dynamism.
I think that's fair.
It's fairly standard layouts on it, whereas, you know, Kirby at this page was like doing first page, then you open up for a double page splash in pages 2 and 3 usually, and then boom into the story with just general action dynamic layouts. This tells the story well. The panels are all kind of done in his style individually, but the actual layouts doesn't have that Kirby pizzazz.
That's fair. Yes, I think that's perfectly fair. I mean, they're obviously trying to emulate the aesthetics, but not the full, as you say, the full
experience,
sort of stylings of you know, the layouts and such like. No, that's absolutely fair. One thing that is a little surprising is how quickly Sandman is able to sort of fix things on Earth. He arrives here and it's dealt with like a page and a bit later.
Yep.
In fact, number 3's there disguised as a fireman. Was that all maybe just part of a further plan just to try and trap Sandman?
Yeah, I think it was.
Setting the monsters loose on the world, was that just done just to catch him? You know, was that really entirely? Because we don't really see any real damage being caused.
Well, I think Dr. Spider does say that it was a failure, but they made the best of it by capturing Sandman. So that is, you know, making the best of a bad situation. But again, I think there's a lot more to be gained by capturing Sandman than there is, you know, just by letting your creatures run loose.
By smashing up New York. Yeah, very much so. Dr. Spider comes back, listeners, of course.
Doctor Spoilers.
Yes, would encourage you to get the rest of the series so you can read along when that happens. I do like that Sandman is like, you know, there's not a lot of shades to him, really. He's it's very black and white. He's a superhero, and I as I said, I seem to have fallen into trying to impersonate Chris Evans, Captain America, at full hype when I'm doing him. So I think that'll work. That's who I'll keep in mind. I think when we do the rest of these, it's quite funny. I want Chris Evans to play him in a film now, please. If you're listening, James Gunn.
And as we said for issue 1, it is like a heightened hero for kids.
Yes.
I mean, it is kids' nightmares, and you've got this hero destroying the nightmares. And of course, what are his weapons?
a whistle that any kid can have and play, and sand that you can pick up literally from the ground.
Yeah, and surprise and fear.
Yeah.
And an almost fanatical devotion to the Pope amongst the Sandman's weaponry.
I'll come back in again.
Yes. Anyway, but no, you're right. It would be easy enough for a kid to play along and imagine he was the Sandman with his whistle and his little pouch of sand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like the hypnosonic whistle idea. I like it all full stop. I just really, really like these comics. They feel contemporary and at the same time, but they do feel a little simplistic, but at the same time, they do feel really imaginative and preemptive. Like they are consistent with what was done in issue 1, and they do feel genuinely, well, so far at least, issue 2 does feel like a real close match to what they were trying to do in issue 1. It's like, it's obviously not a rush job. You know, they thought, right, what's the best way we can do this?
Here's a question for you.
Right.
Do you think this issue would be better if they had given the script to Neil Adams? Or do you think that would have just ruined the whole feel of it?
What, and Neil Adams had drawn it in Neil Adams style?
Yeah. Is this the type of story that would work if you'd done it in a more realistic?
I think it would work just as well. I think it would work differently, but it would work well because obviously Neil's not going to be trying to emulate the Jack detailing, like the Kirby dots or the squared off sort of figures and faces.
Yeah.
But actually that reminds me of the whole stuff he had about when Kirby left the Fantastic Four and they got Rich. Was it Rich Buckler or someone else just to basically try and draw like Jack? Yeah. Copy these panels and stuff. They haven't quite gone that far. I think it's quite easy to picture this in an Adams sort of style. I think the nightmare monsters would look really quite scary. I think Dr. Spider would look terrifying. The hooded figures would all look quite impressive and quite, intimidating. You can imagine Jed looking like one of those little kids from the cover of Initial House of Mystery, A House of Secrets.
Actually, yeah, very valid.
And, I think it would all work very well. Interesting.
No, just curious, because I know you're being a massive Neil Adams fan.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a completely different way of telling a story.
And it's interesting to imagine. Right, I'll throw it back at you. Imagine Kurt Swan had drawn it.
Oh, I don't think it would have worked. Not as well. Definitely not as well.
If it's going to look like an issue of Superboy as opposed to an issue of the Spectre, then it's it's interesting to think like how some guys would maybe suit the type of story being told.
Yeah.
And others, I can imagine the Kurt Swan maybe versions of the monsters would just look like something from from Krypton or something, and wouldn't look too scary at all. I can't imagine a Kurt Swan Dr. Spider.
No, it would look quite naff, really. The monsters actually would be quite good. He's not bad at doing monsters, but Dr. Spider, no.
I mean, I can imagine them just looking a bit flatter. And are we going to do this, listeners, with every story we do from them? How would Neil Adams or Kurt Swan have done it as the two extremes in some ways? No, I think it was good. And as you said, as I keep saying, it's obvious that Mike Royer was sort of kept around because he inked a lot of Jack stuff. I think vast majority of Jack stuff at DC in the 70s. So it's probably a good idea to have him because he's so used to drawing in Jack's style that he'd be able to go right. If Ernie had maybe just done the layouts, we don't know quite the balance, how much how much Mike did versus what Ernie did. But no, it all works very well.
Yes.
It was really, really enjoyable. I'm glad we made the decision to keep doing the rest of these because hopefully the listeners will have enjoyed them too.
Yes. Before we jump on to the contemporary correspondence, there's a couple of artistic choices I want to highlight on page 19.
Right.
The second panel on page 19, out of context, it's hilarious because it looks like Sandman's just talking away in a big blunt.
Oh, wow.
and hallucinating some interesting...
listen to the fabulous furry freak brother over here, listeners. Peter, I bloomin' do swear, Watson. Right, okay.
So, yes, there's that. And also the
final panel.
And the final panel, it looks just like something at the Golden Age, with Sandman just running into action. It looks like it's literally lifted from a Kirby 1940s story.
That's very fair. That's a good observation. And that would,
especially the spotlight around him as well.
Yeah, that's fair. And of course, that was a bit where we didn't see what the caption said.
Yes.
I like the abruptness of Dr. Spider off camera going, hey, wait, there's something, something's wrong. Boom.
Was he even in the submarine? Probably not. I think he's probably round the corner laughing. Do you think I'm in the submarine?
Amazing. I wouldn't put it past them to try and make Sandman think that he'd won and maybe he hadn't. Interesting.
Tom King, bring back Dr. Spider in a whole series.
No. Tom King's writing too much just now. Let Michael read it. Go and read Bug by Michael Reed. That's enough.
Fair enough.
To issue 5, listeners, if you want to read the contemporary correspondence along with us. The first letter goes like this. Dear gang, let me take a few minutes of your time by telling you fellows how great the second issue of The Sandman was, because it was terrific. I, like so many others, bought The Sandman a year ago and was disappointed to find that it was only a special. Now it's all changed and he has his own magazine once more. The only thing I didn't care for about the second issue was the script. It seemed to be more for the younger readers than older fans, and hope that in the future the scripts will mature. Pete did make a point along those lines out that, kids could read it quite safely. They are much too childish as they are now. The artwork was sensational. When I first glanced through, I was sure it was Kirby's, and Ernie's name was quite a shock in the credits. It was a totally super job of sticking to the Kirby style. The best part of the issue was the cover, a Kirby masterpiece. I hope he keeps on doing them. And that's from Dave Feel. Oh gosh, how do you pronounce that?
Sausages.
Sausages, New York.
Editorial response is, not only the covers, but as you can see, Jack's doing the insides too. This is as of issue 5.
Something to look forward to.
And as for the maturity of the scripts, let's just say we tried to gear each of our magazines to a distinct audience, and that we did not intend Sandman to reach the Swamp Thing sets. Very valid point, like that. On the other hand, that's caused considerable controversy because, while some of our readers have written in about delightful scripts, others are very vehemently against them. A couple of cases in point, which leads us on to the next letter. Dear Joe, without hesitation, I can say that your comics are the best in the market. I have come to expect the finest in story and art from you. Sometimes I have reservations about the Spectre, but otherwise, your magazines are excellent in every respect. Except for the Sandman issue 2. I have never been so thoroughly disappointed in an Orlando mag. The Simon and Kirby issue was worse, I'll grant you, but I expected you to improve on their legacy, not to attempt to sink to their level. The plot, the characters, the art, everything about this seems to have been done on the most juvenile level possible. If there was supposed to be some symbolic significance, it was way above me. With a preposterous format to begin with, I expected you would revise the character somewhat, give him a reasonable origin, and tie him in with the DC universe. Instead, you stuck with Simon and Kirby's absurd character. The Sandman has potential, but it will never be realised in the way you're going about it. That's from Jay Zilber from Oberlin, Ohio.
The next letter, no editorial response, reads, Dear Joe, I didn't expect to see the Sandman back. The Simon Kirby issue was a nice piece of fluff, but I didn't think it had what it takes to be a series. Anyway, your second issue has some changes which look rather nice. Cha copying Kirby came off rather well, although Ernie's smooth, easy-flowing style still showed through. I must admit that those panels were the high point of the issue, and Roy's inks were okay, but I've heard that Kirby himself will be taking over the art chores before long, so I won't dwell on art. Fleischer seems to be taking the Sandman premise a bit tongue-in-cheek, and as a result, the stories are turning out better than I had expected. Number 2's Night of the Spider reminded me very much of some of the Golden Age super strips, right down to the lovable sidekicks, Root and Glob. Mike's Sandman has more of a nostalgic flavour than Joe's did, which is surprising. Dr. Spider was a real laugh. He looks like a combination of every villain who's appeared in the last 10 years. The Nightmare device was rather fun, and Sandman seems as pure-hearted and dimensional as any Golden Age hero. That's from Bob Rhodey, Oak Brook, Illinois.
The final letter says, Dear Sandmen, the whole concept of dream monsters turning real and invading the Earth is astounding. The possibilities are unlimited. The characters are great and the scripting is fine. The plot was good, although I don't think they should have killed Dr. Spider. There was very good art considering Kirby's absence, and the unreal-looking covers are beautiful. And that's succinct letters from Lance Butler, Seattle, Washington.
An editorial response says, Never count a villain out till you've seen him buried. Oh, no, we're not going to tell you exactly what it says, but I've hinted at it already. They continue, we look forward to hearing your views about the direction Sandman should move in. Send your comments to Dream Dome, National Periodical Publications, 75 Rockefeller Plaza, New York, 119. So, we will get to issue 3 much quicker than we got to issue 2.
Yes.
That'll be long before too long. And I'm looking forward to it. I don't know about you, Peter.
I will certainly am looking forward to it.
Well, that's all right then.
Listeners, are you looking forward to it? You can email us and let us know. Email us at theearth2podcast@gmail.com. Make sure you follow us on social media because we're putting up some lovely bonus material for this and indeed every episode on Facebook and Instagram. We're at the Earth2 Podcast, and at Twitter, because that's what we're still calling it, we're on podcast_Earth2, and it is the number 2 for all of our socials.
Yes, be sure to check out the socials. I've managed to scavenge quite a few pages of the original art from this story. And I'll send them to Peter so we can try and avoid sort of duplication between the pages of the original art and what panels we select. But there's been a bit of overspill. I'm just suddenly thinking how much fun it would have been to have maybe had a couple more full pages of the Nightmare monsters just sort of rampaging through the city.
Yeah.
That would have been cool, not to worry. Maybe we'll get such things in the future. We'll have to wait and see. But anyway, yes, listeners, I always say, if you're enjoying the show, please do feel that you can go to wherever it is you receive your podcast and leave us a positive review. That'd be lovely. Or go to our coffee page and by Peter the price of a beverage. That'd be lovely too. Failing that, you could just come back and join us again next week.
Yes, on that bombshell. I've been Peter.
And I've been David. Take care. We'll see you soon on
The
Earth 2 podcast.
Transmatter cube activated. Return coordinates set for Earth Prime.
But what you haven't seen...
And again, Dr. Spider with one of his tests. I said it. I said it. Knew I would at some point.
Who is that? Who is that lurking out? No, it's too much like the other one.
Give him an accent.
Okay.
Give him an exaggerated Scottish accent.
Who's that? Who's that lurking outside my cave?
I hope he comes back in subsequent episodes.
That was the best direction you've ever given me for anything.
That was phenomenal. That was great. People are going to love that.